Usually when you wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
you grab your phone and maybe check your bank account, right?
Oh, yeah. Or glance at a retirement fund if you're feeling brave.
Exactly, yeah. And there's this this underlying assumption you just carry around with you every single day.
Mm-hmm.
It's this feeling that the constant hustle, the tracking of numbers, accumulating physical and financial assets, that this is simply what it means to be a human being.
Right. It feels like an immutable law of nature.
Yeah. You work, you accumulate, you secure your position. That's the formula.
It really feels like the permanent, unavoidable gravity of modern life. We just kind of accept that economic struggle is the baseline reality of the human condition.
But, and this is why we're here today, when you step back into the world of human anthropology, that gravity suddenly starts to look, incredibly artificial.
Totally.
That assumption that we are built to just accumulate numbers is exactly what Philip McManus takes a complete sledgehammer to in his recent essay.
He really does.
Yeah, he explores what the coming age of technological abundance might actually bring. And to get there, he completely reframes how you should think about wealth, work, and history itself.
Which is a massive undertaking.
It is. And the mission for this deep dive is to see how the economic water we're all swimming in right now is actually just a temporary puddle.
I love that framing. And what's fascinating here is McManus's core premise that we are currently living at the very tail end of a massive, thousands of years long detour in human behavior.
A detour. Right.
Yeah. The systems we rely on, the ones we assume are permanent fixtures of reality, they're essentially cracking under the weight of their own design right now.
Which sounds terrifying, honestly.
It does, but rather than this being some terrifying collapse, McManus argues it might actually be the exact moment we return to our original natural baseline.
Okay, let's trace that logic, because to realize we're on a detour, you first have to look at the main road. For most of our species' existence, the concept of wealth was completely unrecognizable to modern eyes. Like McManus points out that during the gathering age, our species' long human childhood, basically wealth wasn't something you could just put in a vault.
No, not at all.
And we are talking about a period lasting roughly, 200,000 to 300,000 years?
Yeah, a massive stretch. And to conceptualize that immense stretch of time, McManus uses a powerful scale.
Oh, the clock metaphor.
Exactly. Imagine the entire arc of human experience as a single 24-hour day.
Okay.
On that clock, hunting and gathering, living in highly mobile, egalitarian bands that takes up almost the entire 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. The invention of agriculture, cities, writing, the Industrial Revolution, the internet, AI, everything we broadly call civilization has happened in just the last few minutes before midnight.
That is just wild to think about. We constantly judge human nature by what we've done since 11:58 p.m.
We really do.
We look at corporate greed or territorial wars, and we say, well, that's just human nature. But for that whole 23 hours and 58 minutes, humans lived without ownership as we know it today.
Right. There were no property lines.
Exactly. Wealth wasn't something you held in your hands. It was something you were within.
That is the crucial distinction to grasp, I think. It's difficult for our modern, financially wired brains to process.
Oh, absolutely.
But capital in that ancestral world was not stored in objects. Value was embodied.
What does that look like practically?
Well, it lived in the physical resilience of the body. It lived in the memory of the elders. Like, if a catastrophic drought hit, your insurance policy wasn't a stockpile of gold.
Right, because you can't eat gold.
Exactly. Your insurance was the grandmother who remembered where a hidden spring was located during the last drought 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, capital lived in the interpersonal trust between people and the capacity of the group to, move, adapt, and respond dynamically to their environment.
And nature wasn't viewed as a resource to be extracted, right? Like the forests, the shorelines, the migration of animals. These weren't assets to be earned and managed.
No, they were patterns to participate in.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think of it like playing a massively multiplayer co-op game where you literally have no inventory screen.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. You can't hoard health potions. You can't stack gold. You can't equip heavier armor.
Because there's nowhere to put it.
Exactly. Because you have no inventory, your only survival mechanic, your only way to navigate the game is how well you communicate with your teammates and how accurately you can read the terrain around you. Your wealth is entirely relational.
That metaphor captures the mechanism perfectly. I mean, in an environment where mobility is your primary advantage, an inventory isn't wealth, it's a liability.
Because it weighs you down?
Precisely. If you try to carry a heavy pile of possessions, you literally fall behind the migrating herd. The environment provides the materials, but your capital is entirely relational, distributed among the community.
But let me push back on this idyllic view for a second, because I think you might be wondering this too.
Sure.
If we were biologically just as intelligent 50,000 years ago as we are today, why didn't someone eventually say, you know what, I'm going to hoard these flint tools, I'm going to claim this specific berry patch for myself?
That's the natural modern assumption.
Right.
Okay.
Is human nature inherently greedy and we just, I don't know, lack the technology to express it? Or was something else going on?
Well, it wasn't a lack of intelligence, nor was it some repressed greed waiting for an outlet. Humanity simply hadn't encountered a structural need to externalize its intelligence or its value.
Externalize it.
Yeah. There was no evolutionary advantage to projecting value onto inanimate objects when value was thriving perfectly well in the living field of people.
Oh, I see.
If the group is healthy, and you can rely on the hunter next to you to share their catch, just as you will share yours tomorrow, hoarding a pile of rocks or drawing an imaginary line in the dirt actively hurts your standing in the group.
Oh, because it makes you look suspicious.
Exactly. It disrupts the trust, which is, remember, your actual survival mechanism.
So it's a matter of bandwidth. You spend your mental and physical bandwidth maintaining social bonds and ecological awareness, not guarding a stash of objects.
Precisely.
But obviously, that changed. We shifted away from that 23-hour and 58-minute baseline. So what exactly happened in those last 2 minutes before midnight to completely rewire how we interact with the world?
We experienced the Neolithic Revolution.
Wow.
Around 10 to 12,000 years ago, we see the birth of agriculture. And with the domestication of grain and livestock, humanity unlocked a completely novel mechanism. We figured out how to capture time.
I really want to focus on that phrase, capturing time.
It's powerful.
Because in hunting and gathering society, you can't save today's hunt for 3 years from now. Meat spoils, berries rot. You consume what you find when you find it.
You're completely bound to the present.
Right. But grain is different. Grain is essentially a caloric battery.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. You can grow a massive surplus of wheat, dry it out, put it in a clay pot, and suddenly you have captured the solar energy and human labor of the summer, and you've saved it for the dead of winter.
And the moment you create that caloric battery, an unavoidable chain reaction of abstraction begins.
How so?
Well, once you have a surplus, it must be stored, right?
Sure.
So a storehouse, a silo, needs to be built. But once you have a silo full of vital calories, it becomes a target, which means it must be defended.
Oh, so you built a wall.
You have to build a wall. And the wall fundamentally creates an inside and an outside.
Wow, yeah.
The land that produces the grain suddenly has a quantifiable recurring value, so you draw boundaries to claim that specific soil. This is the pivot point McManus highlights.
The value moved outward.
Yes. What was once embodied entirely within human beings and their relationships was abstracted into objects they controlled.
So the wealth literally left the human body and went into the silo.
That's a great way to put it.
And the mechanics of that change everything. Like, you have a silo full of grain, you need to know exactly how much grain is in there so you know if you'll survive the winter. So you invent accounting.
You make markings on clay tablets.
Right. Those markings abstract the grain into numbers. Eventually those numbers abstract into currency. Land becomes a source of identity. Possession equals continuity for your family line.
It's a massive cascading shift.
But looking at how cutthroat the modern world is as a result of this, I mean, did someone just selfishly draw a line in the sand 12,000 years ago and force inequality onto the rest of us? Like, was this a massive mistake?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, McManus is very clear that we shouldn't view this shift as some tragic fall from grace or, a manifestation of inherent evil.
Okay.
This entirely new structure was a brilliant, necessary adaptation driven by one overwhelming factor.
Which was?
Scarcity. As populations grew and the global climate shifted dramatically after the last ice age, the reliable abundance of the gathering age began to falter.
So survival became uncertain.
Exactly. In a harsh, scarce world, accumulating a surplus wasn't an act of greed. It meant life. It was a vital survival strategy for a rapidly changing environment.
So it was a hack. Like an insurance policy against a very dangerous world.
Precisely.
We projected our survival needs onto grain, then we projected it onto land, then we projected it onto ledgers and money.
And they kept going.
Right. That chain reaction of abstraction didn't stop with ancient Mesopotamia. It just kept compounding over those last 2 minutes before midnight.
Here,
Which brings us to the ultimate expression of externalized value.
The system that dictates almost every waking moment of our lives right now.
Exactly.
The modern corporation.
Yep.
McManus argues that the corporation is the final expression of that outward movement of value that began with the first harvested field of grain.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You and I interact with corporations all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as McManus points out, a corporation is being made entirely of abstraction.
Completely invisible.
It has no physical body, it doesn't breathe, it doesn't sleep, it doesn't feel pain. Therefore, its health is completely divorced from human biological or ecological terms.
Right, because how could it be connected?
Exactly. Its health is measured through one metric and one metric only: numerical growth on a spreadsheet.
Because it is a purely abstract entity, it naturally operates on purely abstract logic.
Makes sense.
When you legally structure an entity to prioritize financial return above all else, it becomes mathematically inevitable that money gets placed above people.
Not because people are evil, but
Right. It's not that the individuals working inside the corporation are inherently malicious. It's that money has literally become the only language through which the system itself is capable of perceiving value.
wow.
If an action doesn't translate into positive financial abstraction, the system simply cannot recognize it as good.
It's like humanity built a giant, incredibly complex algorithmic optimization machine thousands of years ago to help us survive a harsh winter.
Oh, that's a chilling way to look at it.
Right. We needed an algorithm to calculate grain yield, storage, resource distribution. But we left the machine running for 10 millennia.
And we forgot we turned it on.
Yes. And now the algorithm has optimized everything into numbers. We wake up every day pouring our physical and mental energy into feeding this machine, obsessing over the blinking numbers on our screens, totally forgetting that we built the tool to serve us.
Instead, the tool is now optimizing us.
It is.
That analogy illuminates exactly how deep this goes. We are being optimized by the algorithm of scarcity.
Yeah.
Because this entire economic system was built on the foundational premise that there isn't enough to go around, competition became the logical mathematical default.
If there's not enough, you have to fight for it.
Exactly. If the baseline reality is scarcity, you have to compete to secure your caloric battery.
Right.
The individual in the modern world is therefore forced to justify their very right to exist through constant economic struggle. If you aren't producing numerical value for the abstract system, the system tells you that you have no value.
Forced to justify your right to exist through economic struggle. That completely explains the profound exhaustion so many people feel today.
It really does. It's exhausting.
We're essentially running the high-stress survival software of a scarce, freezing winter, even when the sun is shining outside.
Yes.
We're still reacting as if the harvest might fail, even when we have supermarkets overflowing with food.
And this is the exact moment where McManus shifts the entire paradigm.
Okay, lay it on us.
We are trapped in this scarcity-based algorithm, sure. But according to him, the ground underneath this 10,000-year-old system is currently shifting.
Why?
Because the core variable, the scarcity itself, is ending.
Wait, really? And
Yes, we are approaching the dawn of abundance.
Mhm.
And McManus grounds this not in utopian wishing, but in the actual mechanics of our expanding technological capacity.
Okay, listen.
Think about the underlying drivers of the economy: energy production, manufacturing, intelligence. For all of human history, these things were deeply bound to intense, scarce human labor.
Right. Blood, sweat, and tears.
Exactly. But that link is severing.
Let's trace how that actually works for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the rise of things like advanced robotics, solar energy, artificial intelligence, the cost of producing what we need is plummeting, isn't it?
Plummeting drastically.
Once you build a solar infrastructure, the marginal cost of capturing a photon from the sun is essentially zero.
Right.
Once you train an AI, the marginal cost of generating complex intellectual work drops to just the cost of the electricity running the server.
Yes.
So we are figuring out how to generate massive, unimaginable surpluses without needing humans to break their backs in the fields or spend 50 hours a week doing rote tasks in a cubicle.
Precisely. And as the marginal cost of energy, intelligence, and goods trends towards zero, the foundational premise of scarcity begins to evaporate.
Wow.
The very environmental condition that necessitated the invention of hoarding, boundaries, and relentless competition 10,000 years ago, it's softening.
Because if goods and energy are fundamentally abundant, the logic of hoarding them just collapses.
Right.
I mean, because hoarding air makes no sense. You don't hoard oxygen because it's literally everywhere.
Exactly.
If energy and basic goods become just as accessible, those old economic structures, the relentless competition, the hoarding of resources, the measuring of human worth by a bank account, they're suddenly exposed.
They look absurd.
Yes. They are revealed not as immutable universal truths of human nature, but as temporary strategies. A 10,000-year band-aid that we basically no longer need.
They were just a long detour to get us through a difficult phase of our species' development.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a condition of true abundance, competing for survival loses its mathematical necessity. If there's enough for everyone, collaboration ceases to be some naive utopian ideal.
Right, it just becomes practical.
Yes, it becomes the most logical, accurate reflection of reality.
So, turning this to you, listening right now, if you don't have to hustle every single day just to justify your right to exist on a corporate spreadsheet, who do you actually become?
That's the question.
If your basic survival isn't held hostage by an abstraction, what do you do with your time? It feels like humanity is essentially about to receive a massive global software update that uninstalls the scarcity programming we've been running since the Neolithic era.
It's a fundamental reordering of society. And McManus outlines how these old mechanisms will transform.
Also,
Well, currency doesn't disappear, but it goes back to being a simple tool for exchange rather than the master of our social structures.
yeah.
The concept of ownership shifts from aggressive hoarding to more of a model of stewardship. And work transforms entirely, from desperate economic survival into actual voluntary creative expression and community building.
The wealth comes back home.
Beautifully said.
That outward projection of value we made 10,000 years ago is finally reeled back in. True capital returns to the human being,
Yes.
not as a possession you can lock in a safe or some number you can look at on a screen, but as presence, capacity, and connection. Just like it was for the first 23 hours and 58 minutes of our existence.
This raises an important question about how we process the future.
Mimi.
Well, when we read the news today, there is a tremendous amount of anxiety surrounding automation, AI, economic disruption.
Oh, constant anxiety.
Right. It is very easy to look at these massive shifts and feel like it is the end of the world. But McManus offers a profoundly different lens. It's not the end of our world. It is the unwinding of a long projection.
You unwind.
Yeah. We spent 10 millennia projecting our value onto objects, property lines, and ledgers. Now, forced by our own technological success, we are returning inward.
Wow.
We are recognizing that the security and wealth we so desperately tried to store in silos, in gold reserves, and in stock portfolios, it was never really out there.
It was always here, inside us.
Exactly.
What an absolute paradigm shift we've just walked through. We started by looking at the 24-hour clock of human history, right? Visualizing our ancestors who thrived for nearly the entirety of our species' existence by holding their wealth entirely in their relationships and their adaptability.
A completely different way of living.
And then we examined the mechanics of the midnight shift, how that brilliant survival hack of capturing time through agriculture forced us to externalize our value into grain, boundaries, and eventually the cold, abstract logic of the modern corporation.
A giant calculator.
Right. And finally, we explored the mechanics of technological abundance, a shift that is currently eroding the scarcity-based algorithm we've been trapped in, potentially freeing us to return wealth to its original source.
It fundamentally rewires the narrative of human progress.
It does.
We aren't hurtling blindly towards some sterile, robotic, hyper-capitalist future.
Thank goodness.
Right. If McManus is right, we might actually be spiraling back to our most natural, relational state, simply elevated by a much higher level of technological capability that permanently solves the problem of scarcity.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to mull over today as you go about your routine. McManus argues that the wealth we placed in external objects was never truly there, it was always internal. If that is true, and the era of artificial scarcity is truly starting to crack around us, what is one specific possession or one abstract number that you are currently using to measure your own worth right now that you could actually afford to let go of today?
It's a vital question to ask as we navigate this transition because the old metrics are losing their meaning.
Exactly. The next time you feel that anxiety welling up while looking at a resume, a job title, or a bank account balance, just remember you are not the algorithm.
No, you're not.
You never were. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the invisible structures around you, and we'll see you next time.